I wanted to talk a little bit about mindfulness, uh, which we don't talk about that often. And when we do, it's always through a very Zen lens. And of course, it will be tonight as well. But I wanted to draw on a foundational teaching called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, which is something we've never really picked apart. And I should preface this by saying this is very classic teaching. And in the Theravada world, in the insight world, uh, this is something that has been deeply explored. And if you seek out Theravada teachers, insight teachers, you'll find lots of writings, lots of teachings, lots of recordings about the four foundations of mindfulness. And if you're interested, I encourage you to go there, because I'm not going to bring that level of depth in relationship to, it's part of this sutta or this other body of teachings. I'm going to speak about it more broadly. So four foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of dharmas. But before we get into those, there's a basic question of what is mindfulness. There's secular mindfulness, which we might learn about through a class, or it might even come up at work. There are a million articles about this. And the general definition of mindfulness in that context, or in psychology, is paying attention on purpose in a non-judgmental way, which is pretty great. So in that, it's an activity, but it's also a kind of lens. It's a state of mind. When we talk about mindfulness in the context of Zen practice, I think we usually talk about it more as an activity, as something you do or a way of doing things. I talk about holding objects with two hands instead of one. That's a kind of mindfulness. Paying attention to how you walk, paying attention to how you stand, how you breathe, how you speak. It's bringing a kind of intentionality to doing. That's what mindfulness usually looks like in this Zen context. But the four foundations of mindfulness are talking about mindfulness in a way that is different from either of the other two. Related, but it's its own thing. And it's worth noting. And it's worth noting that these are the kinds of things, what we're about to talk about, that I think Zen takes for granted. Not because they're simple, not because they're rudimentary, but because there's a kind of built-in faith that if you do this practice, if you sit in zazen, if you do this other kind of mindfulness, things like this will reveal themselves to you. And so maybe you don't need to be told to look, or maybe you don't need to be given the list. And that's great. But also there's the list. There's the spoiler, and we can look ahead to see what it is that's being revealed. First foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of body. And when I hear that, I imagine this again is about being mindful of how I am, how I hold myself. But that's not what mindfulness of body is. Mindfulness of body in this context is mindfulness of the fact that your body is impermanent. It's mindfulness of the fact that your body is composite, by which I mean it's made of parts. You have cells. You have viruses running through your bloodstream right now that both are and aren't you. You have blood and it's you, but if you cut yourself, it comes out. You're changing. I don't look the way that I did 20 years ago, and I don't look the way that I will 20 years from now. Parts of me are becoming modified by time. Parts of me are becoming weaker. But parts of me, if I work at them, can become stronger. And we've talked about this in the past. We have this idea that this is who I am. But how far does that go? If I were to lose my hand, would we say I'm incomplete? That I'm no longer fully me? I might feel that way emotionally, but we would understand that no, I'm still me. So what was my hand? It is me and not me. So mindfulness of body is noticing that you are something in flux. Your body is something that is in flux. Mindfulness of feelings is the same. It's exactly the same. This comes up in psychology a lot. In fact, it comes up in mindfulness-based therapy a lot. This recognition that feelings change and that feelings are made of other feelings. Feelings are dependent on other factors. And so, yes, I may feel sad, but the way in which I feel sad is dependent on so many things. My sadness is related to memories, it's related to smells, it's related to tastes, it's related to my body and my state of physical health right now. My sadness changes according to other things like stress. It changes according to other things like weather. So these feelings, even though they are of me, and even though I am the only one experiencing them, are not me. Nor are they something stable that I can rely on. And this is useful in a psychological context because we can understand if we can recognize this, then we see there's no value in clinging to a feeling. If anything, the value is in stepping back. Because tomorrow that feeling will be different. It has to be different. In the same way that your body is different. Your body is changing out cells. Your feelings are changing out their own components. And some parts of them are getting stronger and some parts of them are getting weaker. And this is always the case. You have different feelings right now than you did when I started talking about feelings 3 minutes ago. And if I wanted to, I could tell you a really sad story right now, and I could change them again. Or I could show you a video of a cat, and I could change them again. They seem so powerful when we're experiencing them, and yet they're incredibly permeable. Always subject to change, always subject to other factors. That's mindfulness of feeling. And then there's mindfulness of mind. Same thing. Noticing that thoughts change. Noticing that perceptions change. Noticing that my identity, my notion of who I am, changes. And it changes more the more that I let it. So if I cling very tightly to one idea because I'm afraid of it changing, I might be able to hold it a little bit longer. But as I do, it gets smaller and smaller. It becomes harder and harder for me to move. If I allow it to change, it does change. Guaranteed. So that my worldview right now is not only not the worldview I had when I was a young man, not the worldview I had when I was a child. It's not the worldview that I had yesterday. because there are new factors. I watched the news. I ate a good meal. I looked at my kids' homework. And with each new factor, mind changed. And here I'm speaking of mind as a kind of collection of thoughts, but we can, if we want to, link it back to the body in terms of the brain, where we know very, very well that the degree to which we link ourselves to our brain is the degree to which we link ourselves to something that can never be pinned down. Not only is it constantly changing, but it is deeply vulnerable. If we are lucky enough to live a long time, we will lose, probably, a good deal of what we think of right now as us. And that will not feel so lucky. If we realize it's happening, it might be terrifying. That too is mind. And mindfulness of mind is noticing that that's built in. And last, there are mindfulness of dharmas. Mindfulness of dharmas, of course, dharmas includes everything. So it includes body, it includes feelings, it includes mind, but it also includes everything you see in front of you. Everything you experience, everything you touch and smell and taste. Everything you can imagine. So when you see a bird is a dharma. And when you remember high school, that's also a dharma. When you take a walk, that's a dharma. Mindfulness of dharmas is looking out at the world and seeing it not just as the snapshot of now, but as moving parts. Parts that arise and parts that fall. Parts that appear and disappear. That combine in different ways to create different things. The four foundations of mindfulness, these four objects of focus, are a kind of agreement to inhabit the world in an unstable way. We sometimes say, there is no solid place to stand. It takes a certain courage, a certain level of risk to agree every day, every moment, to adopt this kind of practice intentionally. Again, with time, with practice, just with age, these are things we come to realize. Right? If you see spring happen over and over again, if you see fall happen over and over again, you figure out impermanence whether you're Buddhist or not. When you see people having kids and you see people dying, when you realize one day that a memory that was important to you, you just can't see it anymore. We can call it Buddhism, or we can just call it awareness. We can call it truth. We can call it how things are. These things reveal themselves no matter what. And as always, what we take up in this practice, from whatever direction, is the choice to look at those things that will reveal themselves anyway, but to do it now. And we can take these on one at a time, or we can take them on separately. Noticing what the body is noticing what all dharmas are. It's that simple. And the same is true in reverse. And I said earlier, that when we take up mindfulness of the body, we realize the body is not me. We take up mindfulness of feelings, we realize feelings are not me, and so on and so on. But the point is not to distance ourselves from that. Not exactly. Because if I sit here and I say, well, the body is not me, I'm still stuck in I. Now I'm just dissociated from my body. If a feeling arises and I say, well, that's not really real, that's not me, all I'm doing is further solidifying this idea of a me that I can't see, while dissociating from things that I experience. It's not that that's not you, and it's not that you're not real. You are. In this moment, you are you. Instead, it's recognizing that in this moment now, you're a different you. And now again, in this moment, you're a different you. Not just noticing it, but allowing it. Releasing this contraction that we're always in. Of this is how things are. This is how I am. This is what the world is. These are the things that make us feel safe, and to a certain degree, the things that make us feel sane. But there is a sane way to hold all this. There is a sane way to step back and allow for it. I would say that some of that can be found in the practice we talk about here. But some of it, and that's where a simple teaching like this is so beautiful, really is just simply in choosing to look at it directly, instead of letting it sneak up on you, instead of being surprised by it and hurt by it and disappointed by it, instead of putting up that fight. And so the Buddha said, this is our task, to always notice this and this and this and this, which is really just this one thing. That the world is not as it seems. And that we are not who we think we are, because that would be impossible for more than the blink of an eye. And that's where I'll stop.